Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We're so happy that you guys are here, and we're excited for you to listen to the conversation with our guest because we're obsessed with her.
We are literally obsessed. We're so impressed. I'm going to introduce her real quick and share some of the things she's involved in. So today's guest is Aparna Pathasarathy. She's a high school student focused on human rights, women empowerment, political science, and government. She's passionate about remedying structural inequalities, closing educational gaps, representing Gen Z's values to shape legislation with elected officials, and informing her generation on the policies that affect us and the future. I'm so excited for you guys to hear our conversation with her because she goes into detail about organizations that she's involved in that are really making a difference on a national level, a state level, a global level even. So hope you guys enjoy our conversation with her, and let's get into it. Hi, Aparna. Welcome to Real Talk About Feminism. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
We're good. Thank you. We're so excited you reached out to us, and we're so excited to have a conversation with you because I think, as you mentioned, in our previous communication, a Gen Z perspective is so fresh in these days. So we're really excited to talk to you.
Yeah, it's really, when I was listening to the previous episodes of your podcast, I thought what you guys are doing is so cool. And it's very interesting compared to other feminist podcasts. It's very different.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we're excited to have a conversation with you. Immediately, just for everyone else, I know we're going to get into it and we're so excited to talk to you, but you are a junior in high school and you have done so much work and for women's rights, for equality, just a lot that you're doing. So how did you get started? What made you so passionate about being an activist?
I would say it definitely started my freshman year of high school, which was 2 years ago, which is not a lot, but I feel like I've lived a lot in those 2 years. But my freshman year, I worked with a lot of local political offices campaigning. And it was such an interesting experience for me because I would have to knock on doors and I had to call people that I didn't know, and they were people that I had never spoken to. They were random people that just lived in my community. And I think I learned a lot through that experience. I learned a lot about the people that live around me, and I learned a lot of stories of these people. And a lot of times I would call someone asking them to vote, and they would just end up telling me their life story, I guess, because it was just nice to be able to talk to someone. And so that kind of made me want to go into advocacy and go into governmental representation and things like that, because I realized how important it is that there's someone that is advocating, and there's someone that's helping other people, and there's someone that's able to enact change in the community. And I think regarding feminism and female empowerment, my first interaction with female empowerment and feminism came when I was in fourth grade. I had to do this project called a wax museum project where we all had to dress up as historical figures or people who were influential. And I picked Malala Yousafzai, and she just recently won her Nobel Peace Prize, I think at some point around that time. And that's when I fully realized, this is a thing. And it was very eye-opening and something that made me realize that this is something that I'm actually really interested in and I really want to fight for.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love that it started for you at school and you're developing your passions, figuring out problems in the world that need to be addressed. And so I think that's really cool. If you have a future in politics, we will be voting for you. You have our vote.
I just think it's so important that we have people like you who are so passionate about advocating for other people, because in the political world nowadays, I don't feel like any of my representatives truly are there for me, have our best interests in mind. And so it's really important that you are a rising advocate for people that need help. And it's really important.
Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely say, considering what's happening politically, I feel a lot of politicians are more concerned about, fighting the other side of things rather than helping the people that actually got them elected.
Yeah, and I think it's there's a lot of issues with like especially younger people, and like we've experienced this too, even though we're a little older than you, but still like in the same generation and everything. A lot of times people want to like discount younger people
Yeah.
because like, oh, you guys haven't had as much experience in the world, like I've experienced this and this and this, and you guys have not been around that long, but that doesn't mean that we can still be change makers. And so I think it's amazing that you've done all of this already at your age, because you're building such a great platform, and you do have experience. Like you can use your voice, you can advocate for people
Yeah.
no matter your age. So that's really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah. I completely agree.
Yes, it's so important. Do you have like a good support system of people who not necessarily like have to agree with all of your opinions, but people who are there for you and support like your mission and what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably like the biggest reason that I was able to actually do all the things that I'm doing. My family has been so supportive, so encouraging, especially like when it comes to like my parents. My mom, she's a big like female advocate. And especially within like a South Asian community, it's often very hard for that to come out.
Mhm.
But my mom, she's like the most educated person in my family. So she's gone through a lot, being like coming to where she is and having to like fight for herself in like corporate America. Um, and so seeing her do that, and my entire family has like really stood behind me and my mission to do it. Like my book is actually like dedicated to her for all the lessons that
Aw,
she's kind of
Oh,
taught me about this, and like how much that she's gone through to be able to get me to where I am.
that's
that's amazing.
awesome.
It's nice to have somebody who supports you and you can look up to.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your book because I'm so interested in this. Um, can you talk a little bit about, for one, the process of writing the book, but also how you ended up in Peru in the first place and helping these women in Peru?
Okay, so first of all, the process of writing the book, I will say, was a little like complicated, especially like balancing school. It's not something that I would really recommend to many people, because it was a lot, especially with like APs and all the other things that high school involves. But um, it was a lot, especially not just writing it, because I wrote a bulk of it during my summer vacations and during like winter breaks and things like that. But the editing process did take a very long time because you have to go back in and read it like 5, 6 times, like over and over and over again. And it was very complicated having to like talk to other editors, talk to publishers, and be able to really convey the story that I want to convey without it being like overrun by someone else's creative vision.
Hmm.
But I will say that I am very happy with the process and how it turned out. And like my publishing company, they were very supportive of me, especially like considering my school schedule. They were very like they were able to manage my time. They were very flexible with it. And they understood like where I was coming from. And I think that was something that was really nice of them. So yeah, okay. So back to the book. I so basically it's technically 4 short stories and takes place in 4 different areas. So there's Peru, there's Nepal, there's the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and then there's Mali.
Okay.
And so I first started with Peru because I had worked with women there through this organization called Womapura, which empowers these female like tapestry people, like the females like weavers in these like indigenous areas, these like
Oh,
mountainous areas near the Andes. And my experience working with them was so enlightening, and it was so empowering because I think so often when we think about women's rights and women's empowerment, we think about education or things that women are lacking in their life instead of seeing like what they already possess and how we can amplify their goals and their dreams. Because these women, they not necessarily all of them wanted to go to college to go on like to live in like a capitalist society and wanted to become doctors or lawyers or engineers. They just wanted to like weave these tapestries, and what was so beautiful about it was in these families, like the women were the breadwinners. They were the ones that were providing for their families. because like they were telling their stories through these tapestries that their mothers passed on to them, their grandmothers passed on to them. Like it was a very like ancestral art that they were able to tell. And the problem with it is a lot of like tourists and tour guides were like overlooking these women because of their gender, and they weren't able to access the resources that they had. And so I worked with them to kind of give them a more international base and to help them access an international community through grants, through social media, and to help them share their platform and share their art skills with the rest of the world. And I think that was something that really started me on the journey of saying that I want to write this book and I want to be able to tell the story of these women everywhere, because there's so many more narratives than just like a girl cannot go to school or she doesn't have access to menstrual products. And while those are such important stories, there are so many stories that are not being told right now.
Wow.
That's amazing. So you were actually in Peru with them.
Unfortunately I was not, because it was like right when COVID was happening.
Oh yeah.
So I would have been able to go, but COVID was a whole big thing and I couldn't go, unfortunately. But I talked a lot with these women like through Zoom and through like email communication. So I was able to get a lot of their story down, like, to the best that I could, considering the restrictions.
No, that's amazing still.
I think that's like even more powerful in a way, because like you were able to help them so much, and you guys are completely across the world, but like you still used your resources and you heard their stories, you gave them a voice and like helped them to like with a business almost, because you're talking about grants and like stuff like that. So I think that's amazing that you were able to do that even through COVID and just doing it through Zoom.
Thank you. Yeah. I think COVID really impacted a lot of things. But it's so important that like things like this exist, like video, Zoom, that like allow people to become activists and advocate for others.
Right.
Yeah, it's so great. And Haley and I talk a lot about how it's important that we get out of like our little bubble that we live in America, and like we as white women, like we acknowledge we have a lot of privilege. And so I think it's just so cool that you were able to help like women of a different country who just needed a little help in like promoting their art and sharing their stories. And I just think it's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break to talk about our sponsor, BetterHelp.
It's 2023 and it's time to really prioritize our mental health this year. No matter where you are in life, everyone can benefit from therapy. Whether you need to work through trauma or just need a safe person to talk to, BetterHelp is here for you.
BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy service. Get matched with a professional licensed therapist in your state who you can trust.
BetterHelp has options to communicate with your therapist via chat, email, or video, and you can message them at any time to get help.
BetterHelp is giving our listeners 10% off if you sign up using the link in our show notes.
If you're struggling with depression, anxiety, relationships, trauma, grief, or just need someone to talk to, try BetterHelp today by clicking the link in our show notes or go to betterhelp.com/RTAFpod to get 10% off today.
So, along with your book, you have obviously, like I said at the beginning, an amazing resume. What are some other highlights like in your advocacy career so far that like really stand out to you?
Oh, that's a tough question. I've done. There's been a lot of things. So yeah, definitely campaigning would have to be one, and then along with that would have to be like interning at like government offices, like local government offices. It goes along with that entire thing of like representation, because it like people would call the office with like complaints that you would never think would be a complaint. I remember I think someone called the office and it was this really sweet old lady, and she was saying that like her husband, he used to like need these like fluid like IV bags for some like medical illness, and then she had no use for them and she wanted to end up like donating them to Ukraine. And so I was able to help her find like different organizations to be able to help her to do that. And I was able to call different like governments and things like governmental organizations. And I think that was something that's so beautiful that like you don't get to really see every day, to be able to talk to these people and to help people like that. So that's definitely one of my favorite. I think one of my favorite things is just being able to talk to people and being able to help them with issues that you never think would actually be an issue.
Right.
And you think it's silly, but like it's really not. Especially like you think, oh, she can just search it up, but like I think just like being able to help her and be like, oh, we have connections with these offices, like you should send them there, was really truly beautiful, and it was really nice. Along with that, probably I would also have to say working for this government, not this government organization, but for this organization called Stand, which basically stops to like and tries to prevent genocide in a lot of countries, such as like
Wow.
Myanmar and also like currently kind of what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, and even to a certain extent what's happening here in the US with like Black individuals and like their unfair treatment by the police. It tries to stop those issues that are currently happening. And I worked a lot with this organization, I still am, to like to tell like to like advocate for what they're doing to through like newspapers, through like government officials, through other like local sources, to be able to tell people what's actually happening, and again to like broaden like their perspective, to get out of their bubble, to know what's happening in the world. And there's so many more problems other than what's going on with them. And I think even like as a high school student, that's something that I need to remind myself of, that like me taking like this test tomorrow is not going to be as big as like what's actually happening like in the world. And there's so many bigger things happening.
Right.
And that definitely broadened my perspective as to like, I don't know, like a worldview, gave me more of a global perspective, and it taught me a lot about just the state of our world and like all the problems that are there that we need to be able to fix.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it does become really easy to just focus on ourselves, because obviously like there are so many problems in the world and everyone has their own individual issues, and so it can be really easy to just look inside ourselves and be like, wow, I'm really struggling with this class at school and with my mental health, or like my family is having issues. Like, we can just look at ourselves, but I like that you said it is important to broaden our perspectives and have a more global perspective, because there's a lot of issues in the world that need to be dealt with, and so maybe looking outside of ourselves and helping others, like that can help us.
And I think too, a lot of times like on social media we see all of these terrible things happening all over the world and we're just desensitized to it at this point. It's like, what am I going to do to help the people in Ukraine? Like, what am I going to do to help global warming? Like we just see so many things constantly bombarded through social media and the news that it just gets so hard sometimes to be like, I just don't even know what to do anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think like especially with like TikTok and with Instagram, you see so many of these issues and you just feel like they're thrown at you. And sometimes it can be a lot. You kind of feel like hopeless, like, oh, what is my role in this? Like there's so many, like, there are things, but what am I supposed to do? And I think that's when these types of organizations, that's when advocacy, that's when volunteering comes into play, where just like if you just do like one little thing, like it can help so many people and it can have such a big impact. Or even if you just help like one single person, that's better than just kind of just like sitting and saying like, I can't do anything about it, and just moving on with your life. And I think that's something that I've truly learned through all of these different experiences.
Yeah, that is amazing, because it's more simple than like, oh, everyone needs to go and write a book and like help women in other countries. Like, no, you can just start by volunteering somewhere locally and helping out that way, just like doing little things. It doesn't have to be this big thing. And luckily we have people like you who have a really strong gift for like advocating for others and rising up and like sharing a positive message. So luckily we do have people that want to spread that word. And so then for listeners, like if you're thinking, how am I supposed to help? Like just do something small and that will make an impact, like bigger than you think it will.
I agree. I think like even like you guys are like just like sitting down with me, like sitting down with other women who are doing things, who have gone through different issues, you're able to spread that message, to be able to educate more people. And I would definitely say just like, even though we are talking like on a global scale, there are still problems within like our communities, our individual communities, and just like working at like the food shelter, like the food pantry, or like donating, like helping like women who don't have access to like clothes for job interviews, or who do not have access to like menstrual hygiene products, even things like that. There are so many organizations that do things like that are able to do that here and to do that internationally as well.
That's a
Very
great
true.
point. So, what do you feel like Gen Z in particular brings to the political world and advocacy?
I would definitely have to say, like, this is like social media. We were talking about social media in a bad way, but there is so much like good to it. It just has to be used for in a good way. I think I was actually talking about this very recently with someone else, and I was saying, like, social media, like, you can connect with so many people through it. That's the beauty of it. And more than like our parents or our grandparents, we have access to that technology. Like, I cannot remember a time where I was not able to just like access a phone or access a computer and be able to search whatever I want up.
Right.
And I think we often too like see the negative side of that, and we don't think like of the benefits of that we can use it for good. And even with what's currently going on with like Congress and the government trying to ban TikTok, they're
Right.
only really talking about bad things of it, but I see it more as a good thing, like the things that I've learned, not just about like what's going on in the world, but about like life, about like makeup and like random things like that. Like, I've learned a lot just through TikTok, through Instagram.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we can use it for. We can use it to advocate for bills. We can use it to, or like, help other women, to help them, like, to lift them up, lift their platforms up if they're speaking about something that we think is important, and we know that we have that privilege and that ability to help them. And I think that's something that a lot of like influencers are not really doing. They're not lifting up these people that have important platforms to discuss things that are actually crucial to viewers, actually crucial to like the world. And it's important that we use social media for its benefits, to like connect people around the world, like from us to like India to China, all the way to like Brazil. Like, it's, there's so much goodness in it, and there's so much like genuine interest in social media and like the benefits that I can have.
That
Yeah, and there are so many influencers who have massive platforms that never address anything real world, like other than like wellness and makeup and stuff. And not saying that like all influencers should be expected to share all of their political opinions and stuff, but in certain events when the whole globe is impacted and we have the resources to make a difference for the people in that country or in that area of the world, it is just such a shame that like that's not a focus for some people. And
Yeah.
if you think about how many people they have in their reach that they could be spreading a message
Mhm.
to, but then they choose to only talk about more superficial things. I don't think that's a good use of social media all the time.
Mhm. I completely agree. I would say, like, I know like a lot of like influencers, a lot of celebrities shy away from saying anything political that might cause them backlash, but to a
Mhm.
certain extent, like, human rights are not really a political issue. Like,
Right.
women's rights shouldn't be political. Like, there are problems that women are facing, and like it shouldn't be about whether you're like a liberal or conservative. You want to fix that. It's just about like helping them. I think that's what kind of is like confusing to me, because like it's human rights. There's people being affected. Like, the planet is changing. Like, that's not something that we can like argue about. That's something that we have to change.
right.
Right. And when did it have to be like so politicized? Like all these issues that are literally just human rights that if we all pulled
Mhm.
together, we could make such a bigger difference than we can right now. And it
Yeah.
is just such a shame that like everything is such a debate nowadays.
Mhm. And I
I
think
completely
on social media, it's the same thing with like what we were saying before with like just doing something small to make a difference. Like our platform, like we release episodes every week and we spread these messages, and we don't have the biggest reach, but we still keep going because we
Yeah.
know what we're doing is good and positive. And so I feel like just because these influencers who have like huge platforms, if they're not going to choose to address like human rights issues, that doesn't mean that like it's not, the message isn't going to get out there. Like if small creators or like just individuals can all put their voices out there on social media, like many voices are super strong. And so like that's powerful too. Like even just like if you're listening right now, if you had some thoughts about like women's rights or like a situation going on, like the situation going on in Iran, like if you
Mhm.
wanted to get on your
Yeah.
social media and just share like, hey, this is like what's going on and we really need to raise awareness, you can donate to this cause or do some research and educate yourself. Like that is powerful. So
Mhm.
we can use social media as a huge tool, which is
I
amazing.
completely, yeah. It's just like there's so much benefit to it. Like even like it seems trivial just to, like post something on your story or like make a post about it.
Right.
There's so many people that could see that and could like it could trigger them to do something, and even just doing it is triggering yourself to do something and to want to learn more about what's actually going on, because it's such like a multifaceted issue and there's so many problems in this world that like it can feel like we can't do anything, but we can. And like even just like donating to an organization like that in itself is just putting goodness out there in the world.
Exactly. I totally agree. So, what are your goals for the future? Like, what are like in the next 5 years, where do you see yourself? What are the important issues for you? And like, where do you want to be?
Mhm. Okay, I mean, well, first of all, graduating high school.
Yes.
That's number one. um like I would hopefully next 5 years I'll be how old? 22, so I've like just graduated college. Hope to be in law school. I like and like helping people through that through like NGOs and things like that, like furthering my cause for women's rights. And also I hope to be able to like live in an area where I can help like multiple different people and be able to have some like a lot more impact than I currently do as like a 17-year-old high school student.
Hmm.
So definitely I hope to work with other women, especially like I'm really interested in helping like women who have who've experienced like domestic violence, reaching out to them, being able to like get them on their feet. I think that's something that's so important. Um it was just like within my community. So I hope to be able to do more of that, to do more on like a global scale, helping women that like women in Iran, women in like Afghanistan who are currently having their human rights like denied because of their gender. I hope to be able to put an end to that. And I hope that just is not an issue also in 5 years. I hope that a lot of the issues that are currently happening are just not existent. That's
Yeah.
the desired thing, that they are less need for advocates in this world because it's just better. The world is just better in 5 years, but realistically, it's probably not the
Yeah.
case. Um, I hope. I also hope like to be working a lot more with like climate change and stuff, especially with the Willow Project. That
Yes.
was really rough.
Really
Yeah.
disappointing.
Yeah, and so I hope that the climate is not super terrible and that it's not completely ruined to a point that we cannot get it back and that we can still live in this world. Like and my children, my grandchildren can still live in this world. I
Right.
think that just to keep advocating, I guess 5 years from now.
Right, and there's always issues that need to be advocated for. I think that's a really great plan, though. I think your goal of being a lawyer is really great. I'm not surprised by that because I think you'd be great, and you love advocating for people, so that seems perfect. Do you currently like volunteer, like work with any organizations that help with domestic violence? You mentioned that's something you're passionate about.
Yeah, so I do. I have like within my district, like the state that I live in, like I live in New Jersey. So like we have like in my little like township, we have like a center for empowerment. And so I work with them through like this like youth program that kind of helps to advocate for women and like especially like on a student basis to because like dating violence, like teen dating violence is a big issue that a lot of people don't really talk about because it's kind of normalized, especially like on TV and stuff. You just kind of
Right.
see it and then you're like, oh, okay. And then you move on. So, especially, like, I work with them to put up, like, especially now that it's like, kind of coming up, we do like, oh, like, what were you wearing? Like, boards and posters of like what like rape victims were wearing, what domestic violence victims were wearing to show that it's not just about like the clothes you're wearing, especially like in high schools and like middle schools to teach kids that like it's not okay and like it's not about what you were wearing. And just hearing the stories of those women that I've worked with through that is also, it's so heartbreaking. It's so incredibly heartbreaking, especially considering that a lot of these women will say that like society has silenced them and told them, oh, like you can't not talk about it, like it's taboo, like don't say anything, you'll ruin his life. But that's really another thing that I hope to change in 5 years, for that to be also non-existent, for it to be like less destigmatized, to be more destigmatized. And like, especially through the uses like social media, if we could just like, because it has so much benefit in like destigmatizing things, especially when it comes to like things like sexual health. That's been a big thing recently.
Right.
And so being able to help women just like share their stories, I really think is very beneficial.
We need you as our third co-host because your like passions and everything align with everything we agree with. Like all the things you're saying, I'm like, yep, we did an episode on that.
Yep.
We love that. Like, it's so amazing. So yeah, I think you're bringing awareness to a lot of really great issues. And do you see yourself like in politics in the future, like after you go to law school?
I'm not too sure. Honestly, like being in the political like world and seeing it through like I guess like rose colored glasses, like I've seen just like the glorified version of it as an intern, like you don't really see like the nitty gritty.
Right.
But I mean, I would not like, there are some problems to it, but like I would never like, I don't think like on a national basis like a senator or like president or anything, because that is a lot, and especially like the scrutiny that you're under as like a representative on that level. But definitely like I would consider like being like a state representative for like my community, like through like local legislature. I think that's something that I would definitely be interested in too.
That's
That would be
awesome.
so cool. I'm excited to see where you go.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have like so much ahead of you. You've already done so much. So I'm excited to see like everything you're going to do. And we'll definitely keep in touch because you're doing amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add or share with our listeners before we end?
I don't think so. I think just to like get out there and help. I think that's my biggest message, just to do something small today. Even if it's just something, just do it, I think.
Yeah. I love that. Everyone go do something small today. We will too. Do you have like any platforms that people can find you? Like, are you on social media?
I do have Instagram. It's like not super businessy, but I do have one.
Okay.
It's like, do you want my handle? Like my account, like username?
Yeah, that if you want to share
Yeah,
it.
if you're comfortable sharing, just so people can like see what you're about and like follow along with your journey if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah. So it is at APAR0206 if you want. I post a lot of stuff about like women's rights and like what's going on with like my book, or just general like me reaching out to like newspapers to talk about different issues and different like representatives and stuff.
Awesome. Okay, well, we will be sure to put your book information because for our listeners, she's published on Amazon. So we'll put your information in our show notes. We'll put your Instagram account. And guys, follow along with Aparna and her journey.
Thank you so much. It was
Yeah,
really
so
great talking to
much.
you guys.
Yeah, thank you
You
for coming
too.
on.